The following recording has been created by Youth Out Loud and supported by Healthwatch Kingston. It has been funded by the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames Resilience Fund.
Right. I'm Scott from Healthwatch Kingston and Youth Out Loud. We're interviewing Sophie for our podcast on access to NHS and social care services for young people, or for people living with a disability. Welcome, thank you for joining us. We've got some questions to talk about your experiences, or for yourself and your daughter. But would you like to give us a bit of a background about your story and your daughter's story, to understand your circumstances a bit better?
Rachel is 33 years old. She's lived in the Royal Borough of Kingston all her life. She has profound and multiple learning disabilities, so she can't speak or read or write. She has severe uncontrolled epilepsy, and she's got a peg tube in her stomach, and she needs all care. So she's had a lot of contact with health and social care.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So to go back a little bit, so in terms of sort of being diagnosed, was it an easy process to go through?
Yeah, well, Rachel was born in 1990. She was a healthy she was a full-term baby. And at the time she was born, we didn't know she had any disabilities. So she was my third child. And I picked up on the fact that she was quite slow developmentally. As the weeks went by, she wasn't sitting up, she wasn't mouthing, there was no visible disability. And then at 9 months old, she got seen by a consultant paediatrician and was originally diagnosed with cerebral palsy. That was then dismissed by the time she was about a year old. And Rachel has been to Queen Mary's, Roehampton, Great Ormond Street Hospital, the famous Children's Hospital in London, Kingston Hospital, St George's in Tooting, Charing Cross, Hammersmith Hospital, King's Cross Hospital. So all over southwest London, trying to seek a diagnosis. That never actually happened. They thought she had Claudia de Lang, they thought she had Fragile X, they thought she had Angelman syndrome, which is the most sort of fitting, but the deletion of the chromosome wasn't picked up. And so the first 5 years of her life, it was clear she had disabilities of an unknown cause. And that's actually quite common.
Well, for children to go through from one diagnosis or suspected diagnosis to the next?
There's a large proportion of children that are not diagnosed, but it's very clear. So they have no formal diagnosis, but it's very clear that they have disabilities. You don't know the cause.
Yeah. Whilst you were going through the process, was there support for you?
No.
Okay.
I'll say that quite loud and clear. It was very, very difficult. I think I was seen as a sort of competent, quite stoic mother. And also the fact that I happened to be a registered nurse and she was the third child. But there was very little support and very little understanding of how difficult the impact is on families and family life of the unknown. And also, I mean, can you imagine going to all these different hospitals across London? And I don't even drive. And her father was working full time. And we were going here, there and everywhere, fitting in these appointments when the other two children were at school, or grandparents were looking after the two older ones while I was taking Rachel here, there. And it was very, very difficult.
Yeah. Well, in terms of arranging appointments, if obviously your other two children needed to be picked up from school or whatever it might have been, were you able to move appointments around at all? Can you remember?
I did actually, because I'm quite competent at doing that. I'm not frightened. I'm not frightened of the medical profession or nursing profession because I'm in that profession. I can imagine for some parents, they would find it hard.
Yeah.
They would find it hard. But I would simply phone up and say, no, I'm sorry, we can't have a 9 o'clock appointment because I've got two children that I need to get to school and they're both little. Because they were very close in age. So I need to drop them off and then get to you. You know, so we want a 12 o'clock appointment. So it was in the middle of the day. And then I could finish with the appointment and then return to the school and pick up the two older ones.
Okay.
So I did used to manage it, But you have to be quite stoic and assertive to do that. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard.
Yes, I imagine a lot of parents would stick with the appointment and then call on, like you say, grandparents or anyone else to try and support the other children. After diagnosis, did the amount of support you received change? Services become available to you, or?
Well, there was no official diagnosis.
Okay.
So a diagnosis is that like, you know, if you say they've got Down syndrome, they've got Angelman's. So it's clear she's got profound learning disabilities. There's no getting away from that because she didn't reach her milestones. She didn't learn to speak. She didn't learn to walk until she was 6.5. So it's clear that she had severe learning disabilities right from the beginning. There were some things that were given. So physiotherapy when she was under 5 at home, speech and language therapy, and something called portage, which I don't know if that exists.
I recognise the word, I'm not sure.
So portage was a system where the worker would come into the family home, because it's specifically for children under 5 who are not at school, and works with the primary carer, it's usually the mother, to teach the mother to enable her child with disabilities to develop. And there was a booklet that we were given. So it's what's called a peripatetic service, so where they go in the family home and they're guiding mum, usually, or primary carer, to help the child develop. And that was in the borough of Richmond and the borough of Kingston that was given, but I have no idea if it still exists. And so much has gone now. I think services are actually reducing rather than increasing.
When we were sort of coordinating this, you mentioned around services or disappearing on you. But before they disappeared, you were saying actually things didn't exist, and you had you and I'm guessing other parents had to argue and to get certain support. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so for instance, one of the services that has completely gone in the borough of Kingston was something called Warren Park Children's Centre, which was a centre on Kingston Hill in a beautiful location, backing on Richmond Park. An enormous house that was specifically for children with disabilities, run by social services, and it provided after-school clubs, holiday clubs, and it also had 2 houses either side of the central house that provided all the play opportunities, that provided overnight respite care. I think there were 6 beds in each, so there were 12 beds altogether. Now, I personally, as a family, we didn't use overnight respite because I didn't want to, but there were many parents that did. That service has gone. So the council sold Warren Park and it's gone.
So there isn't an alternative that sort of services sort of.
Well, I think that they've tried. They say that there are alternatives, but from my connections with mothers, and it's mainly mothers that I have connections with that have children with disabilities in children's services now, they say there's nothing like Warren Park that exists. So some of the parents are offered maybe support in the family home overnight. So if you live in a 3-bedroom terrace and you've got 2 other children like we did, right, and you're not really well off, you don't have somewhere for a support night worker to be, or where and let's say your disabled child is in a bedroom that's not very big, and most houses in the UK are not very big. Where does the support worker go? There's all sorts of issues. And do you want them in the family home? And does it really give you respite? As mum and dad might be up half the night thinking, is everything all right with the night staff in my house? And you've got a stranger in your house as well. Was the other thing. I know that they eventually won't be a stranger if you get to know them. There's all those. So for a lot of parents, they don't feel like that is respite care. When I talk to them about the Warren Park Children's Centre, they think that setting, that type of setting is amazing, because at least they actually get a break from their child, and often it means they can concentrate on their other children. The other thing is the after-school clubs and holiday clubs that were provided there were exceptional. And for so many children with severe and profound learning disabilities, they can't access mainstream holiday clubs. I did eventually manage to do that for Rachel, and I campaigned and got her into the Malden Centre for after-school clubs and holiday clubs. But number one, it was a battle. Number two, she was the first child at the Malden Centre in 1999. So she was 9 years old. She was the first child to go with such a profound learning disability whereby she needed a support worker with her. That was the issue. So the Malden Centre would accept her. I'm quite happy to pay for that care like any other parent. It's my duty. I didn't want anything free, but they wouldn't accept her without the added support. I couldn't afford the added support, and the disabled children's team ended up giving it to her. I don't know of any other child that's gone since.
Okay. So the funding for the additional care came from...
Disabled children's team.
Okay.
And it enabled me to work as a nurse, right? So that was important. And at that time, the government had issued a paper called Thinking Big Childcare for All. So childcare was a massive agenda for the government at that time. And you probably heard of something called Sure Start, and so it was the Labour government that were rolling all of this out. So in Thinking Big Childcare for All, they specifically identified children that they wanted to get the childcare. And those children were children with disabilities, children from ethnic minority homes, and children from single parent households. Ironically, at that point, I fell into all three categories by the time this paper came out in 1999. So disabled children, ethnic minorities, single parent. I go along to disabled children's team and I start asking for the care. Childminders wouldn't take Rachel. Holiday clubs, after school clubs wouldn't take Rachel. There was no provision specifically for children with disabilities that would enable me to work. So there was Warren Park Children's Centre, but you were only allowed to have 2 after-school clubs a week, which was useless to me because I needed to work more than 2 days a week. And that's how the campaign started. What I've since learnt is that things did roll out, things did get better. There was more child care provision given, but I've also learnt that many parents cannot get childcare for their disabled children. It's almost impossible. And I know that things have actually got worse. So things got better and now they've got worse.
Do you mean in terms of childcare settings or through sort of PAs, personal assistants, support workers, carers, whatever title they may be given?
Everything. So if you look at all the different types of childcare, you can have childcare in the home. You can take your child to a childminder, holiday and after school clubs that are, arranged, like places like the Malden Centre or whatever, or at a school. What other types? Oh, and there's obviously specialist childcare. But how many of these places will enable a parent to be able to work? So often what happens with children with disabilities is that we get a token gesture. So they say to us, oh yeah, you can have 1 day a week after school club. When all the other children where we live, if their parents wanted to send them 3, 4, 5 times a week to the Malden Centre, these were able-bodied kids, they could do that. They paid for it, they could do that. Now, I wanted to pay for it, and I did pay for it, but they wouldn't take her unless she had the added support because of her disabilities. So that's how that fight started. And in the end, she did get the support.
Do you have like a care needs assessment around to try and get some PA hours for Rachel so she could access these with a regular carer that would get to know her?
Well, what they call it, then, I don't know how the language is now, but at that point, under the Children's Act, you've obviously got all the child protection stuff, which is Section 47, I think. But there's something called Children in Need, which is Section 17 under the Children's Act. And children with disabilities fall under that umbrella of Section 17. So they get assessed through that as a child in need. But not all children with disabilities, not all parents even know about that. And not all children with disabilities would even fit in, even in the old days. I don't know about now. I think things have got worse. So I think, for instance, I'll talk about the schools. I think most of the children at Dysart, where Rachel went, which is the school for severe learning disabilities, would fit into that spectrum. But for instance, there are many children at St Philip's, which is the bigger school for children with moderate learning disabilities, that wouldn't get assessed under children in need because they weren't deemed severe enough. And at St Philip's, you had children with Down syndrome, you got children with various needs who clearly needed support.
So it fall on sort of family to. We visited a couple of colleges and schools and spoke around, and I was kind of surprised to learn how many people don't have a personal assistant to do the sort of social activities. So I'll just pick them up from after school and go cinema, bowling, cafe, all the things that whatever they want to do. And
yes,
the vast majority of them said they didn't, and it was they go out with their brothers, sisters, parents, aunts, uncles to do those activities.
Yes. And that was common then, although things slowly, during Rachel's teenage years, things slowly improved, and in her 20s, but I think things have retracted. I feel it's really difficult for parents. They've got to be on the ball, they've got to be knowledgeable, they've got to be reading all sorts of policies. And you see, for instance, one of the things I said to the Malden Centre was, can I see your policy on taking children, right? Because when they said, no, we can't take her because she's got disability. That's what they said to me.
Yeah.
Initially. So we can't take her because she's disabled, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that's a bit odd because I saw there was all this sort of equality stuff. So I asked to see their policy. In their policy, it said, we do not discriminate against children, ethnic minorities, gender, religion, and disability. Right? So this is what it said in their equal opportunities thing. So I go back to the Malden Centre and I say, but you say, you don't discriminate against disability, ethnic minorities, blah, blah. But you are, because you're saying you won't take her because of her disabilities. I'm prepared to pay. I'm not asking for a free place.
Yeah.
So then all these arguments then occurred between the local authority, because the local authority oversees the Malden Centre, if you like. It's linked into RBK, although it's a private company that runs it. Yeah. And then between the Malden Centre management, between disabled children's team. And in fact, in one meeting, the manager of the Malden Centre, in an open meeting, I'll never forget this, said, if my staff had wanted to work with disabled children, they would have got a job working specifically with disabled children. And that was so outrageously discriminatory that she got hauled up for that, right? And I was going to make a formal complaint, but I couldn't be bothered. I mean, the manager of disabled children team heard it out loud and clear and gasped when she heard it. In the end, so things went on from there, right? And there was a lot of tension. But in the end, I managed to secure her a place at the Malden Centre, and I did pursue it, even though we had those difficulties, because the Malden Centre is in our community. I didn't want to send her some other part of the borough. Why should I? It's where our neighbours' children went and her brother and sister went. So it was important. It was very, very important. And in the end, it worked. In the end, it was successful. But it was a long...
And a lot of arguing to get there.
Yeah.
I was going to ask what the transition from children's service, obviously Rachel's now in adult services.
Yes.
So in terms of social care and obviously medical team, can you remember how that transition was? Was it easy to navigate?
No, well, I mean, it's ironic. I've been talking about children's services like it was all so awful, but I have to put things in perspective. For us personally, I thought Dysart School was exceptional. So her education and her school placement was absolutely fine. I didn't have a problem with that. And also, I found that people in the educational settings, because you've got qualified teachers, people have got a qualification in teaching, in education at degree level. And there is a difference between that and adult social care. And there is, and you can see it. So when you look at, I'm not saying everybody's got to be a nurse or a teacher to be professional and do things, but the transition from children's services to adult services was difficult, because this is a really difficult thing to say, because the quality of the staff were different. So care workers get paid such a meagre amount of money that you're attracting different types of people to different jobs. And I found that when she left Dysart, and eventually when she was 21, she went into supported living. That was really hard. I mean, some of the support staff were abysmal. I'm sorry to say that to any families that are listening to this. I found it very, very difficult, because at Dysart, it's a very professional setting, and educationalists and teachers have a different approach to what they do with the children and how they speak to you and the information that they give to you. It's hard. It's really hard. Things have got much, much better, and we've stuck it out. I really have to say that I'm grateful for a lot, because she's with a group of young people. They're all 21 years old. They had all been at Dysart School together. They've all remained in Borough, and they've all got profound and multiple learning disabilities. They're all non-verbal. The house has slowly developed. Management is crucial. So who manages the house is crucial. We've got a fantastic manager at the moment, and she's been there a long time, and I'm sure she'll stay for a long time. And we've got a really good group of support staff. But there have been a lot of issues, and far more serious issues than I ever saw when Rachel was in education.
Okay.
Because now she's living overnight away from me, it's different. The whole of social care, I mean, I know education is in a crisis as well. Everything's in a crisis at the moment. I realise that education is having problems attracting teaching staff, but can you imagine what it's like in adult social care if you're only paying people £11 an hour to do nursing skills, to do a peg feed, to wash and dress somebody, to brush her hair, to do her teeth, to take her to the GP surgery, to manage her epilepsy, to give her masses of medication, to take her to activities, to do activities with her in the house, to give her a hand and foot massage, to talk to her parents. You pay people £11 an hour. I'm really not being disrespectful. It's hard. It's very hard for us in social care at the moment to attract, highly skilled, good quality of people to do that type of work, because the pay is so low and they're undermined and they're ridiculed. Look how the government has treated them. If we want good quality staff and we want people who can really care for our people with disabilities and the elderly, it's the same with dementia, it's exactly the same. If you want to attract good care quality, you have to respect people, train them and pay them well.
I was going to ask if there's been any issues with continuity of care and the changes of staff.
That's been a big problem. And you see that was a big change as well, because at Dysart School, we didn't see this constant rotation of staff. At Dysart, there was a lot of stability and coherence and continuity of care. In the setting that she's in now in supported living, there's the management not only have trouble attracting good staff, but also keeping them. So what we found, she's had some brilliant staff. So I don't want to undermine care workers. So she's had some brilliant staff. But you know what happens when you get brilliant staff? They train, they're brilliant, and they leave because they're brilliant. And they all the staff that she's had that have been really, really good in the house have gone on to do their nurse registration, to be a social worker, to gone on to bigger and better things. I completely understand that. Of course, those particularly young women, they're all been young women, because Rachel only has female staff and the male in the house has male staff. But all the really exceptional staff do, they might stay a year or two and then go. It's a good learning curve for that. I mean, she had a fantastic key worker who at least was with her for 3 years. But I knew in my heart of hearts what was going to happen, because as she gained confidence as a care worker, and as she was becoming more skilled and knowledgeable, I knew that she was let her wings expand. And I actually said to her, "You ought to train as a nurse." I had just ended up saying it, even though I didn't want her to leave. I said, "You're so good.
Yeah.
That's what you should do." And that's what she's doing. So she's training as a registered nurse, which is fantastic. So that's what happens. It's hard. But maybe with the care sector, it needs to be professionalized in itself to maintain and keep people in the profession. And what I find extraordinary is that, so when I was a young registered nurse in the late 1970s and the 1980s, the things that the care workers are doing now in Rachel's house would only ever have been done by a registered nurse.
So their responsibilities have
changed dramatically. There is no way that in the 1980s they would have allowed care staff to do peg feeds, to do medication, to do wound dressing, in particular the complex medications that go on in that house. But in the 1980s, I can tell you for a fact that there is no way that care workers would have done that. They weren't allowed to. They actually weren't allowed to. Only registered nurses could do that. So as the years have gone on, through the 1990s, and we're getting more elderly people, more people with dementia, more people with disabilities living in the community, more and more and more is foisted onto the support worker. Yeah, it's very, very complex. And that's why, each government has talked about social care, trying to address it. Because the Labour government's talked about it, the Conservative government have talked about it, and they're the only two parties, let's face it, that have been in power. Both major parties have talked about it, but have never addressed it, and they need to address it.
So all the time that obviously Rachel's had carers, support staff, their responsibilities have gone up.
Yes,
other things haven't changed for them.
Exactly, and you want to retain good people.
Yeah.
They're not going to, unless I think they need to professionalise the job. I think it's a profession in its own right now.
Yep.
And it's changed, and I know it's changed because I'm a nurse.
Yeah.
They now do a lot of nursing duties that only registered nurses could do years ago, and now they're expected to do it, but not get paid for it, not get the kudos. So that must be very demoralising for people.
Yeah, it must be tough to.
So anyway, I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of good things that go on. There are.
The last thing I was going to ask you around is around physical access to any sort of services with changing places. So are there any issues physically accessing like a dentist, a GP, hospitals?
Well, I've just been at Kingston Council talking about changing places toilets. Yep. Which are unique types of toilets that you have a radar key for, and they're for people with disabilities, but specifically for people with disabilities that need a hoist and a changing tray with specialist equipment, and they're very large, so that person who's having their pad changed, because that's basically what it's for. It can even fit in 2 support workers in there as well. So even if they're 2 to 1, and easily accommodate that. So we don't have enough of them. And interestingly enough, we spoke about Kingston Hospital today, because does Kingston Hospital have a changing places? Because, of course, we were talking about leisure.
Yeah.
And all these different activities and things, and which is fine. But then it occurred to me, I was thinking, as I was talking to these women, I said, actually, I don't even know if Kingston Hospital's got changing places. And it's the one place that should, because it's a hospital with masses of people who might have appointments, who are disabled.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit experience in a past job around trying to plan your day, knowing where your nearest
Changing places is.
So, yeah, even one near the medical setting, whether it's the GP centre or the hospital, you're limited by how long you can sort of be there comfortably.
Exactly. So the one in the Bental Centre is closed.
Okay.
Been there for years. So I've learnt today that it's been closed for about a year.
Oh, right.
And the Bental Centre, and that's private. It's not run by the council.
Okay.
So that's to do with the Bental Centre business itself. But they haven't fixed it. That's in the heart of Kingston, the heart of shopping.
Yeah.
I think there's one at Moor Lane Children's Centre, Achieving for Children.
Okay.
Where Disabled Children's Team is situated. So yeah, so access to say toilets are a big deal. Some of Rachel's family live in Brighton, and so we go down there. We've been down there quite a lot. So I'm just talking about an ordinary disabled toilet, which I can change her in. I don't need particularly a changing places, a disability toilet. So we're at a centre in Brighton, in the centre of Brighton. This is a few years back. Can we use the disabled toilet because it seems to be locked? And she said, no, because we use it as a store cupboard. So, and it wasn't even the position where she could just open the door and take a few boxes out and we could use it, because it was literally piled up to the ceiling. Because I got a little bit cross and assertive, as I normally do, and said, why have you got a toilet for disabled people and you're using it as a store cupboard? And she said, seriously, I don't know. And she actually unlocked it and showed us, and it was packed. So you couldn't just start removing a few boxes and then let Rachel use the toilet and then put the boxes back, because it was absolutely packed. It was used as a storeroom. So we find the 2 things that can be quite difficult are transport for accessibility and toilets. And now, I mean, you look at railway stations now, often the toilet with disabled toilet might be not just locked with the radar key, but permanently locked. You can't get in them. She can't give consent. We're not going to do that. So we've resolved that. But every now and again, there are issues that come up with health. These sorts of things happen.
There's more on your web. There will be more on your web. But those are our sort of main sort of learnings from what we found out, what we heard. Just want to thank you again for your time today.
Youth Out Loud is a group of young people helping to improve our local health and care services. We work with Healthwatch Kingston and we use our voices to make health and care services better for young people.